80% of the purchase decisions are taken by women. And there's a lot of products that we would like to see in the market that are not there because VC is funded majorly by men who don't even understand the needs we have.
Welcome to another episode of Forging the Future. I'm here today speaking with Juliana Garaizar, Head of Houston Incubator and VP of Innovation at Greentown Labs. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
Yes, absolutely. Or like we just call you Juliana. You're Juliana everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
Yeah. So you have a long entrepreneurial career like myself, 15 years of entrepreneurship, investment, venture fund management, all kinds of stuff. So maybe tell me a little bit about how you got interested in startups and entrepreneurship, and how did funding begin?
Yeah, so I started my career in Singapore. I was doing international trade at the Embassy of Spain there. Then I was recruited by Citi, and I was doing project management all over.
Is that where you grew up? Or
I grew up in Spain.
Where did life start for Juliana?
Life starts in Spain, in the Basque region, so very close to France.
All right.
So I'm from Bilbao, and then I studied my high school in the French part of the Basque region. Basically my last year of university was in France. A lot of people were heading to Asia from that university. So I decided, to explore the world. And my first job I landed was in Singapore at the Spanish Trade Commission. I was there for a year and a half, and then I wanted to stay in Singapore. So I was lucky enough to get...
I heard it's beautiful there.
Oh my, it's amazing.
I've never been. I want to get there someday.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Asia for beginners. So it's very safe.
Yeah.
It's extremely international, and then you can go anywhere from there. So I would spend every weekend like diving or biking around islands or going to different countries and backpacking all over. So that was a cool period. Yeah. So I worked for Citigroup there for 3 years, and I was traveling all over the world with them. Doing technology. Credit card system migrations.
Is that what your degree was in, or what was
My
that?
degree was in finance.
Finance, okay.
Yes, yeah. But I always had a soft spot for tech.
Okay.
So I used to work with a lot of programmers there, and my career was going great at Citi, but I felt disconnected. I felt like I didn't have enough impact, and so I didn't know what I wanted to do. I decided to do an MBA in London. I always thought that, being a global citizen was part of who I was. So I wanted to do one of the most international MBAs. So I went to London Business School, and over there, I gravitated towards the entrepreneurship major. I really liked dealing with entrepreneurs, and I got into an exchange program at Haas School of Berkeley. So when I was in Berkeley, I went to Silicon Valley. I got totally hooked by the entrepreneurial and the investing bug. And I was recruited from London Business School to run an incubator in the French Riviera. And
that doesn't sound bad.
And an angel group there. So
French Riviera.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was very, very cool. I spent 5 years there, and my incubator was amazing. They called it a business resort. So we had pools and restaurants overlooking the sea, and, art gallery, a big theater. So you would have people there doing business, but at the same time coming for fun, and gym. So there would be a lot of serendipitous collisions there, which I always think is very interesting. And they were running an angel group there too. So we were a very special angel group because there were people from everywhere who landed in the French Riviera for retiring or commuting from London or Paris or Amsterdam, other places. So we ended up investing not only in France, but all over the world. And actually, I helped some of my members create their own angel groups wherever they came from. So I ended up going to Turkey, Istanbul, to Chile, to Bahrain, to Spain, and help create those networks and those funds.
Wow. Oh, and I'm thinking about, I didn't have a passport until I was 40 years old. Right? Of course, a lot of Americans, I mean, there's so much to see and do in the United States.
True.
So you don't actually need a passport, but I've really enjoyed traveling since then. I think I've made up for it. I have a couple million flight miles now.
Yep.
So, but it looks like you were collecting all of the countries.
Yeah, well, it's easy to collect countries in Europe, right? Because you're like in 2 hours,
States,
you're
yeah.
like, you can do like 5 different countries, right?
So, and you speak multiple languages then? Or
Yes.
did you have to speak different languages when you're in Spain and then in France and then in Singapore, or what was?
Yeah, I mean, I speak French since I was 3, and of course I'm from Spain. But then, you know, living in France, the French Riviera, I used to be Italy before, so you pick up a lot in your Italian too, and we also have a different language in the Basque region.
Oh, really? What is that?
It's called Basque, and it's the eldest language in Europe.
Really?
Yeah, so it's even.
Is it like a mixture of French and
No,
something else?
not at
or is
all.
It, very
It doesn't
different?
have any Latin roots, and
really?
you know,
It's not one of the Romantic languages?
Not at all. It's pre-Indo-European, so it's even before Sanskrit, and that's why it's so difficult to.
Is that your native
learn.
language then?
Well, I mean, it's a native language of my family, and you know, I understand everything, and sometimes I butcher it because you know the grammar is a little complicated. So you know, but it's it's the language of the heart for me. Yeah.
I decided to learn programming languages instead. So
very smart. Very
I speak
smart.
a couple dozen programming languages.
Well,
but,
you can get around a lot with programming.
a little bit. I did take French in high school, actually, but don't test me, please. And I do know a little bit of Russian, actually.
That's good.
So
Very good.
But no,
well,
not like
I
that.
mean, when you're English is your first language, you get so spoiled because everybody understands you, right? So you don't feel the need to do the effort, I guess.
I wish I had actually taken Spanish instead of French because I've spent, you know, the last 40 years here in Texas.
Yeah.
So the French isn't really doing much for me.
Well, that's when my family comes over to visit me, it's like, I don't know why we were, you know, doing all these English courses. You know, you come here and everybody understands you. So we can't even practice it.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you're in the French Riviera, you have your angel groups, you're doing an incubator. Then what happened?
My husband happened. He was working for Shell in the Netherlands, and he got a promotion to come to Houston.
I see.
So that's why we moved, and that was 12 years ago.
Okay.
So when I came here, I first landed a job at the Houston Angel Network.
All right, Han.
Which I ran for 5 years.
Were you the president then of Han?
I was the managing director.
Okay.
Yeah, and we became...
Is that what like Allison is now? I think Allison is the... I don't know
there's a new person,
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I think they changed almost every... Well, it sounds like you did 5 years.
Yeah.
They've had a few presidents since then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So Allison is the president.
President, okay.
True.
Okay.
Yeah, but I was the managing director. So there's a new managing director.
So 5 years of...
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at one point, Han was the largest angel group in the United States.
That was under my tenure, yes.
I don't know if it still has that title or not, but...
Doesn't, unfortunately.
Doesn't? Okay.
Yeah.
Where is the largest, do you know?
That's interesting. Most probably, I would say, should be around Tech Coast Angels. But CTAN has, the Austin network has been very active too.
How many angels are in Han or were, roughly?
You know, it fluctuates between 80 and 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. So you're heading up Han, and somehow you made your way to Greentown.
Yes, passing through the Texas Medical Center, venture fund.
Yeah.
Yes, I was recruited by Greentown. So one of the board members of Greentown in Boston was a company that actually Han invested in. So I knew the founder pretty well. And he was the one who convinced me to apply to do the expansion of Greentown to Houston.
It was the first one they had done, right? They started in Boston, and Houston was the second location.
Yeah, Houston is the second location. I didn't apply for the role because, the role also entailed putting a building together. And I thought, I didn't have any experience in that.
That's always the fun part.
Yeah, I know. It ended up being the fun part. But I didn't feel I had the qualifications. So Jason Etier, who was board of Greentown Boston at the time, said, we'll get rid of that part if you run it. And that's what they did. and I hired him to run that part. So he was the one who ended up putting the building together for Greentown.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a big project.
Very big.
Did it just happen to be next to the Ion, or you picked that location? Is it going to be part of this whole Rice master plan?
Yeah,
down there?
for sure.
Like
yeah.
that building's not just going to get bulldozed now once they build it all out, or what's the plan?
So we Greentown Labs is for those who don't know who we are. We're the biggest climate tech incubator in North America, and our buildings, 2/3 of our buildings are prototyping space, right? So you need to make big things. So you need loading docks. You need like a more or less industrial building. You blow things up. You get cars in there. So there's no way any kind of building works, right? So it had to have this industrial component to it. And this old Fiesta supermarket in the middle of Midtown really fit the bill, just because of accessibility, because we had already loading docks that we could keep. I forgot
it was an old Fiesta, right?
Yes,
and it was adapted.
So we took over, we adapted it, and one of the reasons was also the location. So it was the building characteristics of the location. Very well connected to the roads in the innovation district, and very much with good parking space and accessible. So all these things close to downtown, close to, of course, the rapid rail. Public transportation was key for us too. Made it an excellent location without forgetting our landlord. The Rice Management Company has been an incredible landlord for us. The condition they gave us, all the help. We didn't get any competing, all the other options were not as well located, less accessible, and we didn't have a landlord that would understand so well, that we needed to be in a place like this to stimulate the ecosystem.
Nice. I have to kid you a little bit because I've been driving EVs since 2010, right? And it was a few months back, I think I was trying to get somewhere at the Ion, and I thought, well, hey, Greentown might have a EV charging location, right?
We are working on that.
Okay.
So it's in the works.
It's in the works. All right, good to know.
Yes. So, we are having a lot of new things happening at Greentown Labs. It's been a year and a half since we opened.
Has it? Okay.
We already have 70 companies. So we are...
How many can you have there? I mean, what is that? Or is it?
It really depends
is it like
on
virtual. I guess there's shared working space and stuff.
It's a shared working space, and also the companies now have 1.3 employees per company in average. I think once the companies grow, it will get to a point where we won't be able to accommodate everybody. But now the companies are still, small in average, so we can still accommodate people. And then we also have room for expansion within the building. We didn't, we didn't redo the mezzanine that is still available. We have around 20,000 square feet available. We wanted to make sure we could also expand into the building.
Nice. And what is the model exactly? If you're a startup and you want to join Greentown Labs, how does that work?
So we have an application process. Not everybody who applies to Greentown gets to Greentown. We only accept 1/3 of the companies that apply. So we don't take any equity. That's why the companies need to be at a stage where they can pay for our membership fees. It's not a lot, but still, it's around $500 per month for a membership, a basic membership with one desk. And then you can, of course, add on more desks and lab space and virtual memberships and a lot of options. But still, you need to be able to sustain that.
So for $500, you get shared working space, a desk, and access to the Greentown's network.
I would say
mentors and.
I would say the connectivity services are the secret sauce. I mean, we still have a space because we are a convener and we love to be building and hosting anything that has to do with climate tech. But we realized with COVID that sometimes the space was not the most important thing. It was the connectivity services to investors, to corporates, and to other ecosystem players. Right. So we're trying to fill that gap. I think there's a lot of places where you can prototype. There's a lot of places where you can have wet labs, but we bring that connectivity component.
Right. Yeah, and that's one thing we're also trying to do with the SoftTech Venture Studio is try to help collaborate among the many different startup development organizations like Greentown and Ion, et cetera. And we all put on a little chili showdown last year.
It was great, so much fun.
Yeah, down at the Ion, you guys were there with the booth, made some chili. And,
a lot of fun. We were having happy memories this week about it.
Were you? Okay.
So next year, we want to make sure we make the chili.
Yeah,
because it was we have some people in the team who moved from Boston and they want to try their chili skills. And I'm like, okay, well, you take on that because that's a tough competition to make a chili properly.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, so, these startup development organizations are not competing.
They're not, and that's the beauty. And in Houston, where we still have a pretty incipient innovation ecosystem, it takes a village for the companies. So they need all the help they can get. So many of our companies have gone through all the accelerators you can see, really Mass Challenge, Rise Clean Energy Accelerator Program. They're doing Startup Factory. They're doing Div Inc., you name it. So, and of course, some of them are at SoftTech right now. And we're very fine with that because, there's still a lot of need for investment, for connectivity. And I think we all bring a special kind of thing. And I think we're not trying to compete. If we see things are done better at some other place, we're trying to complement each other.
Yeah, one place is going to offer more, climate tech mentorship and networking, maybe investors that are interested in climate tech, or you need services. That's something SoftTech can provide.
Totally.
Or, networking through the Ion, which is right next door. So startups really should try to take advantage of everything that's available now, because when I started 35 years ago, there wasn't anything. There was
tough.
Score, and that was it.
We've come up a long way, definitely.
People used to ask me, well, you must know a lot of other entrepreneurs. And I'm like, well, I don't, because I don't even know where they are. I'm just got my head down to my own business, but there was no place like the Ion or Greentown or SoftTech Venture Studio or any of those places to go hang out with other people trying to build a startup, right?
I still remember the old days where there was only the Houston Technology Center, right? And now there's so many places where, you can help entrepreneurs.
Right, exactly. So you also have, you're an advisory board member of a leading portfolio fund.
Yes.
It says here.
So Portfolia is...
Portfolia fund, okay.
Yeah. Portfolia is a platform of funds that are basically led by women, and where the vast majority is women LPs.
Okay.
So we invest in any kind of deals, but just because of who we are, we tend to invest in companies that, are led by women or have a big majority of women or have diverse entrepreneurs or want to add diversity to their teams. They might not have it, but they're very willing to open their cap table to diverse investors. And through that, sometimes, get key hires through our network and bring that diversity aspect that they might be missing on their own.
Very interesting. Yeah, I can imagine some people need some help with that. I also like the fact that given Houston is one of the more, or the most diverse city in the U.S., I've heard some people say, I like that what we've seen in the 50 startups that we've put through so far at SoftTech, we have a very good mix.
Yeah.
And in an ideal world, that's how it should work. So you're not actually preventing the diversity from happening, which is what people actually get in trouble with, because they're like, these people don't look like me, or whatever the criteria is, right? And so as long as you're not, essentially preventing that kind of access, then you do end up with a diverse number of founders.
Yeah, so I think preventing is a tricky word. I don't think anybody prevents.
Well, it's more
diversity.
like an unconscious bias, if I want to call it that.
Correct. So I don't think it's an active action, right? It's not that people are actively preventing diversity from happening, but if you don't actively try to bring diversity, you tend to bring people who look like you, who are in your network, and there's this homophilia effect where you end up having people like have your same thoughts and your same looks and your same, likes and dislikes in the room, right? So you need to make a conscious effort to go outside your networks, to go outside your comfort zone, to include more people. And that means that you have a confluence of different networks and, the pie gets a lot bigger for talent, for opportunities, for everybody. So that's kind of key. And I think, I agree that Houston is the most diverse city in the U.S. I wish we had this kind of same diversity still in the innovation ecosystem. I don't see that, obviously. And then I would say that it's not only about diversity. I think diversity is representation, but then you have to have the inclusion part, right? I see more and more women and minorities being represented, but still they don't have the same voice. They don't have the same rights. They don't have the same salaries. They don't have the same shares, the same carry. And sometimes they are tokenized, right? So they're there in the picture, but then when you dig a little closer, and we do that a lot as investors, it's like, are they there just for shows, or are they taking any decision really? And are they really having some sizable amount of equity in this deal, right? So those are things that we really care about.
And so how do you make sure that's not happening? If someone comes to you or your fund and you're trying to help with the diversity and source and provide people that it's not just a tokenization.
Yeah, so we first of all, in many cases we see them lead by example, right? So their team is very diverse in the first place. We look at the cap table to see who really owns what shares. I think that's critical. And also we try to check what their hiring practices are, right? And in many cases, it's pretty obvious that they want to make an effort and that they also want to onboard and leave some space in the cap table for diverse funds also, right? So I think when you see people who are willing to, and I'm talking sometimes about very successful companies that in general don't need our money, but they are willing to carve some space for us because they think it's the right thing to do, because it's not only about having diversity within their companies and their staff, is also about bridging some wealth gaps, right? Only in general, there's not many women and diverse people who are investing and getting all the wealth that comes with it. So that's also part of the equation.
And jump-starting that a little bit so that you get that cycle going, right? Because I remember early on when I started angel investing, some of the advice was, well, invest in what you know. And
still, this is the wisest advice. But the thing is that if you invest in group, there's always someone who knows, right? So I always say investing is a team sport. Otherwise, you only invest in what you know.
Well, if you're an individual angel, sometimes, I mean, I guess what you're saying is that if you're an individual angel, try to join more like a Han or an angel group so you get more exposure to other people that do know. Because when I first started out and I was out in California, investing in California companies there and thinking about this, and I remember having a woman co-founder come up to me and I had this in my head about, well, I don't know anything about what her business was. And so I'm like, well, I can't really help you because I don't feel like I can be
and you
smart
shouldn't if you don't know what you're getting into. Unless someone you trust knows how to help them and you can tag along for the ride, right?
Right, exactly. So, I mean, it's basically you need to get some outside help. Like, hey, help me figure out whether this is an investable company or not.
So I think there's the angel group route, or otherwise there's funds like ours, Portfolia, or many other micro VCs that have a low ticket size, because I think if you want to get into a diversified portfolio and invest in a fund that's going to diversify the portfolio for you, in many cases the initial ticket could be very steep, but if there's still ways and there's still funds there that are trying to activate more angels like us, where the minimum ticket size is $10K, $25K, so it's a lot more affordable. And with this 10K or 25K, you can get actually a portfolio or at least 15 companies, well diversified, and you can still learn a lot because we very actively engage the investors in the selection process, due diligence, negotiation, all that. But the statistics. I'm in the board in the board of the Angel Capital Association. In terms of returns of investors, angel investors who invest in groups or within groups, you have around a 27% IRR compared to a 7% IRR if you invest on your own. So huge difference.
And that probably also relates to, I think I've seen also statistics where the amount of due diligence you do directly
yes,
affects how much your return is. There's a huge
correlation between the hours spent in due diligence and the outcomes. I think there's, I think it's around 65 or 70 hours, there's a law of diminishing returns, of course. There's so much you can do.
Right.
But yeah, there's a huge correlation there too.
Yeah, one of the things that we like in the Venture Studio is that it gives us 3 months of working time where we get to work with the founders and we get under the hood of their team and also their product and understand whether the technology, is there, is it scalable, et cetera, right? And how do the founders work together?
Of course. I think that's key. You have a first row seat to how the team interacts and makes decisions. So that's key.
What were some of the things that you evaluated companies with as an angel investor? If a startup comes to you, they present. I know you have the Greentown checkbox that you make for bringing it into Greentown, but if you were an angel investor, what were some of the things you primarily focused on?
So as an angel investor, myself, I tend to also invest in what I know. So of course, climate tech is one, but also health tech, with my Texas Medical Center Venture Fund experience. Also, I have a huge network of investors who I invest alongside and have a lot of other experience. So I trust their judgment in many of the deals. But I guess, the team and coachability is kind of key, of course. The market potential, of course, is there too. And anything regarding the product, the tech, protection, IP is kind of key. Maybe in the software is a little different, but anything that has to do with climate tech or health tech, there's always the patent issues there. And I would say also who you invest with and how active they're going to be is key because, these companies need to get to exit. And if you have smart investors who've exited a lot of companies and know how to bring those companies to exit is a very different thing than investing just in companies that, are just accepting money without anything else, right? And smart
Second
money.
and third time founders, I guess.
Yeah. Or at least, investors who are willing to step in and make sure that for the first time founders, they can get to a pretty solid path to exit.
Let me ask you a little bit about Greentown again. I think I understand why they chose Houston, but I mean, was there anything else?
Why
besides,
Houston?
Yeah, why Houston?
Yeah, so I think there was like 3 main areas why we decided. First of all, a lot of the climate tech companies have their customers here. Okay, so even the Boston companies at Greentown, 2 of the initial founders moved to Houston to be closer to their customers. So that created an ecosystem of climate tech entrepreneurs who needed a convener. So that's when, they started doing meetups and trying to convince people internally at Greentown that should expand to Houston. The second was our corporate partners. Shell was the first one. Second came Chevron in Boston. They have a huge presence here. They always were thinking like, would it be nice if we could have a demo day in Houston instead of having to fly to Boston? So that was the second part. The third part was the civic engagement. The city of Houston, the Greater Houston Partnership, were very instrumental in making Greentown Labs expand to Houston. The mayor of Houston wrote a letter to our board in Boston asking for an expansion. And of course, that's something that, you have to consider. The Greater Houston Partnership, helped us tremendously with our missions when the Boston team came over and met with so many ecosystem players, so many partners that ended up becoming founding partners of Greentown. They put money to build the incubator here in Houston. So all these things were instrumental.
And how long did that take? I know you've been around for about a year and a half after you built the building, but I mean, this was obviously took a little while, right?
Yeah. So I've been at Greentown almost 2 years and a half. Mm-hmm. So I was employee number 1 in Houston. I was on stealth mode for 6 months. I couldn't even update my LinkedIn because I was fundraising, and we wanted to hit a certain milestone in fundraising before announcing. But yeah, it's taking a long time, but also I feel it's been pretty fast. So there's this dichotomy there. But for us, it was pretty obvious. Our mission is to solve climate change, and we couldn't not be at the energy capital of the world, mm-hmm. right? There was no ecosystem player in this area, and we felt we could have the most climate impact by coming here and trying to help accelerate the transition.
Interesting that it started in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have guessed that. Like Boston is like a climate tech city. I don't know enough about that area. Maybe it is, right?
Well, it was entrepreneurial initiative. Mm-hmm. So for entrepreneurs who outgrew their MIT lab, mm-hmm. actually, decided to rent a basement in South Boston. Fast forward 1 year and 17 entrepreneurs were there. Mm-hmm. And that's when our CEO, Emily Riker, came and found them, and they were going to be kicked out of that basement. She took over. She brought them to Somerville. She got a loan for the first building. Fast forward 11 years, we have 4 buildings, and we've incubated more than 600 companies, raised more than $2.5 billion, and an 88% survival rate.
Wow. So there's 4 buildings in Boston?
So 3 buildings in Boston,
and one
building here.
And do you think there's going to be any more anywhere else? Or?
Yes, there's going to be. We're going to announce it pretty soon.
Okay.
So I'll keep you posted.
We'll have the anticipation.
Yes, always, right? You always have to create anticipation.
And tell me a little bit about the decision not to take, equity in the startups.
Yeah, I think, we are an ecosystem player. So, we thought that, we didn't want to have like pick winners or, have, I guess when you have equity, your decision criteria for many things changes a little bit. Yeah. And we felt we were at a stage where we needed all the companies and we wanted to jumpstart a new ecosystem. So
it's more about the impact.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's why we are totally okay with playing with everybody and making sure they go to as many accelerations as possible and all that. If you start taking equity, there's so many, right, they can go to just because, of the equity impact they will get if they go to too many acceleration programs.
Sure.
So that's one. I mean, I have to say that personally, as the investor I am, I feel like there's a huge opportunity cost of not investing in some of these very successful companies.
Right.
We'll see. I mean, we've started with a debt fund. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we hear also that our companies want us to have, or at least activate more investment instruments, right? Mm-hmm. So we started partnering with Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator, and we put together a debt fund. So our companies have access to debt, mainly for pilots and things that are, more de-risked than equity,
a lot of them are hardware
course.
Companies probably and need some additional.
80%. 80%. Many of them have pilots that they need to deliver on and, need this kind of debt, or they got grants, but, the payments are going to be later on. So, we're trying to also very actively innovate in capital and capital sources for our companies that don't follow very closely the venture model because they have this very heavy hardware component, at least 80% of them. And that means that, things can be done in a slightly different way, sometimes project finance, sometimes debt. We've talked even about royalties at some point. So we're exploring.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about the decision for you to be employee number one, essentially to take that red pill from working for large companies like Citigroup to being employee number one at essentially a startup in Houston?
Yeah, so I think, my initial part of my career was more about trying to fit in, trying to fit in the banking world, trying to fit in the venture world. And I realized that at a point of my career, I don't have anything else to prove. And I wanted to care more about my legacy and what I really care deeply about, which happened to be two things, the environment and diversity. And now every position, every role I take, they pass through that filter. And that's why when they offered me Greentown, at first I thought like, this is not for me. But when I went to Boston and I saw what they had achieved there, real innovation in action, it was very energizing. So, and I thought, at the point, now it seems like a pretty obvious thing because we were very successful. But when I picked the opportunity, a lot of people were still very reluctant. And, it was actually a little bit controversial to bring, climate tech companies to Houston, right? So really? I always like that, right? I like when you are trailblazing in some areas and you're pushing the envelope. And even for the Boston board, some of them were not like fully on board into the Houston expansion because they thought we were part of the problem. So I had some interesting conversations with the board, and I'm like, I love that. I love building bridges. I love, balancing things, and that's how I decided to be employee number one.
Yeah, that's true that they would maybe have that perspective from. This is what we're trying to change, right?
Yeah. It has its merit, but it's also, at the end of the day, they're also using electricity that comes from fossil fuels. And, there's, I think, some of it, has its point, but, there's, I think everything has a middle ground. I think, oil and gas cannot be seen as evil, right? Because a lot of the oil and gas is actually funding the energy transition. And now if we were to cut the oil and gas, sources, we would be in a dire predicament. And that's happening in Europe right now, right? Yeah. Where you can see firsthand, price of electricity is going through the roof. We're being requested to get our AC and make sure that is past, I think it's 81 degrees Fahrenheit. So
really,
all these crazy things that we need to do because, we don't have that direct access to hydrocarbons. So we need to be careful sometimes of what we wish for because, there's a very, the transition, I think, is gradual. And if you force it one way or the other, it creates unbalances. And, now, unfortunately, oil and gas is funding the transition. I don't think we're ready. Our grid is ready for suddenly have 100% EVs going on because our grid could not withstand it. So there's so many things we can do, and the pace sometimes is the one that we need to follow.
Okay. Maybe tell me a little bit about this show you're at today. It's called
TechC. So TechC. At Greentown, we realized when we came to Houston that there's things that we were very easily able to replicate from Boston. And we got all that learning curve and we implemented them in Houston. It was a huge success. And some other things, we didn't have in the ecosystem. And one of them was what we call the path to Greentown, right? From universities to Greentown. We were founded by 4 MIT students. So the path to MIT, from MIT to Greentown, everybody else followed, right? They had the energy venture scores and then competition and then their own accelerator and their own lab. And then they would grow finally into Greentown. So all the path was very well paved. And then other universities in the Boston ecosystem followed that. In Houston and in Texas, we didn't have that. We didn't have all those milestones to make sure that university students and would get that kind of path to to Greentown. And there were also some funding mechanisms in place in Massachusetts that would help fund some internships that were crucial. A lot of very important roles at Greentown have been actually filled by interns who went through that funding program, the Mass CEC program. So we felt that there was a need for this kind of convener in the Texas ecosystem. So we actually brought the MIT responsibles for the New Energy Ventures program. We try to bring sponsors to fund internships in our space and recreate a little bit the ecosystem that was present in Boston, and we call it TechC. So this TechC initiative, is actually having an event today at Greentown. So we're having students from University of Rice, University of Houston, Texas A&M, and UT that are right now taking the New Energies Ventures course. They're pretty soon going to start with internship programs. Some of them at Greentown, some of them at our startups, some of them at other ecosystem players, to make sure that they get the DNA they need to get to the Energy 2.0 entrepreneurship.
That's great. Yeah, I started, in college in the co-op program, which, you get placed with a company and you get to essentially be an intern at companies like the Light Company.
Yeah.
Also interned down at IBM during the space shuttle days, which was fascinating. And it really is a win-win for both the employee, the intern, the company, and the experience that they get out of that.
Well, Greentown Labs was built in the backbone of interns, really. We couldn't have made it without them.
Oh, wow.
And same thing applies to our companies. And, we want to make sure that that program that was so instrumental in making us a success in Boston was also available in Houston.
That's great. So what's a critical element for you for forging the future in venture from your perspective?
Yes. So venture, I guess, there's a couple of things. I really believe that adding diversity to venture is key to investing in the things that everybody wants to see in the world. I mean, 80% of the purchase decisions are taken by women. And there's a lot of products that we would like to see in the market that are not there because VC is funded majorly by men who don't even understand the needs we have, right? So we're talking femtech products, consumer products, of course, without forgetting the browning of America, Latinx, African-American, are consumers of different kind of food, different kind of entertainment. All these things matter, right? So I think that's key. The other thing is about activating more investing, right? We need to make sure that VC is no longer an elite play, that there's more and more people who can actually, they qualified as accredited investors, or even without qualifying, there's also platforms for non-accredited investors, get access to early stage investing, get educated. I think the education in the financial literacy is key. And I think once we have that, we will have a lot better results. For the hard tech space, I think we need to understand that the VC model might not fit exactly the kind of companies, that have longer timelines, have a hardware component, so they are more difficult to put together. And that means that maybe we will need to deconstruct those deals. And part of it will be venture, but part of it will be debt. Of course, a lot of grants are coming in. So how can we unlock that public money? And of course, there's the project finance angle, royalties. So I think we need to start becoming more innovative in finance and actually also try to deviate some of the money that has been coming to philanthropy. To create more of an impact by impact investing or climate tech investing. I really feel that a lot of the philanthropic efforts in the past were more like, giving you the fish. And now people who really want to have a sustainable impact are investing in, these companies to make sure that they become sustainable on their own. And with the returns, you can still reinvest in other philanthropic areas, but it doesn't have to be through donations only.
Yeah, it's interesting. Instead of just donating, actually providing the money and the philanthropic money for actively investing in something to make something happen.
So sometimes donating doesn't fix the problem; it perpetuates it, right? Because you're only taking care of the symptoms. You're not getting to the root cause and trying to solve it and make something productive of it, generate more jobs, all these things. So I think there's a lot we can do, and I think only by changing market signals and putting right structures for green bonds, pricing carbon, aligning that finance aspect is the only thing that can change behaviors too.
Where can they find or connect with you?
Well, you know where to find me. I'm at the Greentown Labs building in Midtown, and anybody can just step in and just sign up and look for my name. Otherwise, I'm very active on LinkedIn. Otherwise,
Is there like an email address or contact form or anything you want to highlight?
Of course. I'm accessible at juliana@greentownlabs.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn and social media too. I try to respond as much as possible. And then, of course, there's plenty of events. So if you go to greentownlabs.com, you sign up for our newsletter. We do a lot of events that are open to the public. Happy hour, we call Transition on Tap. You sponsor a couple of those.
Yeah.
We have our Taco Tuesdays pretty soon. Next week, we're having our low carbon hydrogen accelerator showcase, and we have our Climate Tech Summit on November 2nd. That will also be in Boston on November 2nd. Sorry, Houston November 2nd, Boston November 3rd, and will also be streamed. We get a lot of attendance to the streaming too. Last year we got 2,500 people.
Wow, that's great. Anything else new that we should be looking forward to?
So we are looking on top of the potential new campus. We're also looking forward to adding a wet lab to our own campus. That's something.
What is that? A swimming pool? What is that? What is a wet lab?
Pour some water into the lab and it becomes wet.
Yeah.
So it's for chemistry,
Okay.
and we have like benches and, we have fume hoods to make sure that the chemical reactions are
not killing anybody.
Not killing everybody,
Yeah.
safety, all that. I think Houston is very well positioned to do a lot of green chemistry, bio innovation, the carbon to value space, because of the legacy we have with a medical center and NASA, and we are willing to make sure they have a lab to go to when they start.
Nice. Okay, what do we have here? Okay.
Oh my goodness!
And I heard you said about your kids, so we got them a little gift.
Thank you so much.
So what's the story behind this? You like margaritas?
Well, I mean, of course.
Who
and
doesn't?
Let me tell you, when we went to your Chile cook-off, I took care of the margaritas.
All right, so I'm the.
And then, of course, we always have tequila jefe.
Well, of course.
And that's what you can do is.
Well, let's
Try to incorporate a little bit of the Greentown with the tequila.
Well, we still have the Pepe mascot that was a fiesta.
Oh, do you?
At Greentown, and at some point I want to call some event Greentown Fiesta. We had a piñata, by the way, to celebrate our first year anniversary.
Oh.
That has the shape of the Greentown logo, and of course we had candies and all kinds of cool things, but we didn't want to smack our logo, so we had like pull the ropes only.
Okay.
So everything was taken care of, but we love that connection, and we have plenty of Latinos at Greentown when you go, because many of them have moved to Houston from Latin America to, expand and scale their companies here. You hear a lot of Spanish at Greentown.
Nice. Well, let me set this up. One thing I like to do is wear different socks. I've got my Einstein socks today with the sticking his tongue out, but we got you some socks of your own. They're green for Greentown, and also margaritas.
Well, this is amazing. I'm going to wear them very proudly. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
And here's a few Softtek socks for your
wow.
kids.
Well, everything, everything Softtek they love. They, of course, got also the Lego one that they made, and they love anything that is Softtek, because you have the coolest like swag and gifts. So
we have some of it's back here. I think we have another fun one coming up for this Christmas. So stay tuned.
I wait for that very eagerly.
It's my fun creative outlet to try to figure out what kind of interesting gadget thing that we can send out every Christmas.
I think creativity is part of innovation, right? And you need to make it like flow in any kind of outcomes. We have our own mural that we inaugurated about, I think it was 3 months ago.
Okay.
And it's beautiful.
Where is that?
It's one of our side of the building. So actually, if you go through the the highway, you can see it.
It's painted, right? Is it painted?
It's painted by a local muralist. She's amazing muralist and educator too. And the mural is about the journey of climate tech, from the idea to the implementation.
That's great,
and it's a lot of fun.
Perfect. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.